Hello everyone. Good morning, guys. I'm sharing my screen. So we were covering web service basics in our previous session, guys. And we have covered SOAP service basics in yesterday's session. And all of you now know very well what exactly XML schema document is, what is WSDL, what is XML, what are SOAP operations, and you also know what is SOAP UI, and you know how to call the standard SOAP services as well. We're going to repeat the same thing for REST APIs today. We would be repeating the same thing for REST APIs today. So what I do was I go to a Fusion Cloud application. I go to a Fusion application. And what I do is I would just go ahead and, okay, let me go into a Fusion Cloud application first. And I can pick up any of the instance EXGS or EUPG. And I'm going to log into the instance as finance implementation user. Now, once you log into the application as log into a Fusion Cloud application, guys, remember yesterday I already told you that there are plenty of standard SOAP and REST APIs given by Oracle. Okay. Now we picked and where do we find that documentation is? So you click on the username and you go to applications help, and that will take you to the documentation screen. You copy that documentation link and you can paste it in another browser so that it will be easy for us to do an alt tab. And where do you find the REST APIs, guys? Say, for example, I want to pick up one of the standard REST API given by Oracle to interact with this Fusion Cloud application. So I go to ERP, I go to financials, and in the finance module, if I click on integrate, what do we see, guys? We can see that there are two links here. You can see the standard list of REST APIs given by Oracle here. And SOAP services here, and you see the REST APIs here. You see the REST APIs here. Okay, just give me one moment, guys. So if you go to review REST APIs, what do you get to see, guys? It would show you a list of REST APIs given by Oracle. Yesterday, we went into SOAP services, guys. Today, we are going into REST. And in this particular link, you find all the REST APIs. Financials REST APIs, because that is the offering that I picked up in the previous screen. And what do we see, guys? You see the REST APIs to load the bank details. So if your client is implementing finance modules and if they're doing cash management, or if they're implementing AR or AP, you definitely need a banks to be configured. And you have APIs for it. And you do have a REST API to load, say, expense reports. And if you scroll down, you also have REST APIs to do ACRAD operations on payables invoices. And if you scroll down further, you do have REST APIs to load the receivable transactions as well. So to keep it simple, Oracle has given REST APIs, plenty of them are to interact with financials application. And as usual, we'll pick up one of the REST API, try to test it and understand the basics, guys. And since we're trying to understand the basics of REST APIs, guys, we're not going to pick up a resource like receivables invoice because the payload could be a little bit complex for you to understand at this point. And in fact, when we do the REST APIs in the course, when we create a purchase order REST API, or when we do AR invoice REST API later on, I'll show you how to consume the standard REST APIs given by Oracle in those applications in detail. Okay. Now, what is it that we do, guys? We go to our receivables. I'm not going to call this now. We'll see how to call the AR invoice API here, this API here in that integration. And we'll also see a procurement use case also. But since we're getting our basics right, we'll pick up a REST API where a payload is less complex. So I'm going to pick up banks as an example. Now, first of all, whenever any client implements Fusion Finance modules, guys, see, I logged into the first instance as a finance implementation user. This is a username I used, and this is a password I got in here. And if you want to see where the banks are configured, so if you click on the username, under administration, you see setup and maintenance, guys. And that will take you to a functional setup manager page. And we don't need to do anything in this particular page. Click on the task ribbon and go to global search. Remember, we went to the same screen yesterday when we searched for a job definition. So why did we come in here, guys? Because we want to see what are the banks configured in the application. So I'm going to search for manage banks here, and it will show you a page from where you can manage the banks. Now, what do we see here, guys? You see the list of bank accounts configured. We do see an option to add a new bank account. We have an option to edit an existing bank. And we do have an option to export all these banks and send it to other application. And if you click on a bank, it would also take you to a read-only page wherein you can see the bank details displayed as not non-editable fields or as view-only fields. So if you have to perform CRUD operations on the bank's business object, what is it that you can do? Obviously, you can get into the application, go to Manage Bank screen, and I can create, update, export the bank details or get the bank details, and I can also view the bank details as well. See, we don't have a delete endpoint, but all other actions we can perform from the screen. But the point is, what if you have to do this? What if you have to do this from an integration that you're building in OIC, guys? Assume that we are in an integration in OIC, and assume that in that integration, we have to pull all these banks and send it to other application. Or maybe you're getting a list of banks from another application and you have to create them here. How do we perform CRUD operations on the bank's resource here from an integration flow? That is exactly where what I can do is I can make use of this REST API given by Oracle, do those operations. The moment you pick up any of the folder here, it is called as a resource. So we are looking at a bank's resource, and in the bank's resource, how many endpoints do we see, guys? What are the endpoints what endpoints do we see here, guys, in the bank's resource? 5 endpoints in total. And these endpoints will help you to create a bank, update a bank, or delete a bank. And you also have 2 endpoints to get the bank details. So in short, you have endpoints to perform CRUD operations on the business object, guys. Whenever you try to, let me just close the other tabs, guys, to avoid confusion. So whenever you go to any REST API, what is it that you would be seeing there? You would see that there are endpoints to perform CRUD operations. You have an endpoint to create a bank. You have a couple of endpoints to read the bank details. You have an endpoint to update a bank and delete a bank as well. So you have CRUD endpoints basically. Create, read, update, and delete endpoints. And when it comes to get endpoints, you see 2 endpoints to read the bank details. And for every endpoint that we see here, okay, first of all, this is called as a resource, and these are called as endpoints. For every REST endpoint that we see, there are 2 important details mentioned, guys. You see a HTTP method, and you also see a relative path. Remember, guys, a REST endpoint is nothing but a HTTP endpoint. And the methods that you see here are nothing but a HTTP methods. And even when you call the APIs, you get a response codes, right? And those are also called as HTTPS status codes. Well, the good part is you don't need to guess what method you need to use for what endpoint. It is given clearly in the documentation. Now, what are the methods that we see, guys? If you're trying to create something in Fusion Cloud, since you're posting a data there, you need to use a post method, delete for delete. And if you're fetching some information from cloud, getting the information from cloud, we use a get method. And if you are trying to update something, we will be using a patch method. We'll be using a patch method. Okay. So these are the 5 endpoints we have. And for these endpoints, we have the required methods. And for these methods, we also have our relative paths given in the documentation. Okay. Now, what is it that we need to do, guys? Let's try to call 4 out of these 5 endpoints. Let's test them and try to understand the basics. So let's try with the get all banks endpoint first. And how do we call this endpoint, guys? To call this endpoint, to test the REST APIs, ideally you will be calling them from OIC, guys, from an integration in OIC. And yes, that is exactly what we will be doing next week. But today, what we want to do is we want to use a Postman tool. We need a testing tool to test the REST APIs. You can use a SOAP UI also to test the REST APIs, guys. But to keep it simple, as I mentioned yesterday, we use SOAP UI to test the SOAP services. And we use a tool called Postman to test the REST APIs, guys. If it is a REST APIs, to test them, we use a Postman tool. All you have to do is go to Google, type in Postman, and it takes you to the their website. Directly go to a download option, and it would automatically detect your operating system. Since I'm using MacBook, it is showing you Apple. And if you're probably accessing this link from a Windows machine, it would be showing you a Windows downloadable file. So if you're using a Windows machine, you download this executable file, double click on it, and install the tool. And it's like just download an executable file, double click on it, and install it. And once you install it, you should be able to see a rocket symbol like this showing up on your desktop. You see a rocket symbol showing up on your desktop, guys. Now, how do you launch it? You open that, click on that icon on your desktop after the tool is installed, and it will open up a tool which looks like this. And when you install a tool for the first time, you will not see any of these tabs. It will be a blank tool. And it might even prompt you to sign up for an account. Well, you can skip it, guys. You don't need an account. But if you want, you can create an account also. And all you need to do is click on a plus icon to create a new request. And when you try to create a new request in Postman tool, by default, you're trying to call the REST APIs here. And whenever you call a REST API, 2 important things that you should pass. What are they, guys? What are the two things that you should be passing in?
Method and the path.
Yeah, you should pass in HTTP method, and you should be passing in a relative path or a URL, not a relative path. Now, the first thing was, let's try the get all banks endpoint. What do you think this endpoint is going to help you with, guys? If you hit this endpoint, this is going to, as you can make out from the name, it's going to go to a Fusion Cloud. It's going to get all the banks that you see on screen. So let's try it out. What's the method that I should use for this? Get method, right? So I go to Postman. Get is a default one. You leave it that way. You can change it if you want, but you leave it that way for get because we want to try the get first. And when you look at the path here, it says FSCM. What does FSCM stands for, guys?
Financial
Supply chain.
And supply chain, right? So that's exactly what we did, what we discussed yesterday also. In case of journal SOAP service, sorry, ERP integration service, it was also mentioned as FSCM service. So you mentioned that, you have FSCM, and if it is a SOAP service, you would have a word service here. If it is a REST API, you see that word mentioned very clearly. And then you have resources version number, and you have a cache banks. This is the name of the API. So I'm going to copy the path, and I would put it in the Postman tool here. Now tell me one thing, guys, does this look like a complete path to you guys? Can I hit the send button?
No.
No, we need base URL.
So we need the base URL, right? We need the instance URL. If I just hit the send button, it doesn't know from which instance it has to fetch the bank details. See, there are at least 2 instances that we know of, right? but there could be plenty of other instances available out there. So Postman wouldn't know from which instance, whether it has to get the details from EXES or EUBG, it has no clue. And since I want to get the banks from this particular instance, what should I do? Copy that Fusion Cloud instance URL only until.com, and that is what you call as a base URL of Fusion Cloud. And you're going to add that here. You're going to prefix that to the relative path. So whatever is a path that we see here, this is a relative path. To this particular path, we should be adding the ERP base URL. And yes, you concatenate these two, and that is exactly how you get the complete endpoint URL, ERP base URL followed by relative path, no space or underscore in between. Now, can I hit the send button? Will I get the output? What is it saying, guys?
We have to pass authorization details as well.
Authorization details, right? Because as I mentioned yesterday, all the standard SOAP services and REST APIs given by Oracle are secured ones. And without passing in authorization details, obviously you cannot call them. And doesn't it make sense, guys? Because anybody who could guess, this is a documentation available in public domain. And anybody who could guess 3 or 4 letters of a client instance, if these APIs are not secured, imagine what could happen potentially. Anybody could walk away with anybody's data, or you can even load junk into the application as well. So for the obvious reasons of 2026, all the standard SOAP and REST APIs given by Oracle are secured APIs, and only after you pass an authentication, it works. So I'm choosing basic auth here, and you enter the username and password, and I hit the send button. I'm using Prasad user here. What's a user that you would be using? A user we shared in the onboarding email, oraclecloud23@outlook.com. Okay. Now, when I hit the send button, what is it that Postman is going to do, guys? It's going to log into this instance with this username and password. And if these credentials are correct, sorry, my bad, guys. Sometimes or very often you get confused, just like I did 2 minutes back. What are we trying to do here, guys? Are we calling a custom REST API built and deployed in OIC instance, or are we trying to call a standard REST API given by Oracle in ERP application, guys?
Standard.
It's a standard one.
It's a standard API that we are trying to call in a Fusion Cloud application. So what login should I be passing in here? Should I pass in OIC credentials or ERP?
The ERP
logins. ERP logins.
ERP
So
login.
whenever you get a doubt, or if you get confused and when you hit the send button, if you still get unauthorized, take a pause, 2 minutes pause, look at the URL, then you get the answer. So since it is EXES instance, what is it that I should be doing? I should be passing in FinIMPL as a username, and I should be entering the password here. I hit the send button. Would I get a response now? Success response. I got back 200 OK.
Yes.
I got back 200 OK here. Now, what is this? And earlier we got 401, right? Now we have got 200. What are these responses, guys? They are nothing but HTTP status codes, guys. Status codes. So if you just go to Google and search for HTTP status codes, you get a detailed documentation. And you see, if you look at the, so REST endpoint is nothing but a HTTP endpoint. And these are the statuses that you're going to get back. So if it is a GET request and if it is successful, if it is a GET request and if it is successful, you would be seeing 200 OK. Okay, you would be seeing 200 OK if it is a successful GET request. And you can see it here as well. So you see the codes that starts with 100 series are informational, 200 series is success, 300 is redirection, 400 is client error like authentication and so on, and 500 are internal server errors. Now we have got back 401 earlier because we didn't pass in right details, and we have got a success for 200 here. Now the next thing that we do is okay, so we've got 200 OK responses is fine. And what are the details that we get to see, guys? We see a collection of items coming back in the response, and we see a banks here. And this is the first bank that we see. And if you scroll down further, you see that there is a second bank that you're seeing, ABN AMRO Bank. What's the first bank that we see here, guys? Abu Dhabi Islamic Bank. Is it a first bank that we see here as well, Abu Dhabi Islamic Bank? And what's the second bank we see? ABN AMRO Bank. That's the same bank that we see here. And what's the third bank we see? ANZ Bank. So to keep it simple, whatever banks that we see here, all the bank details were fetched here. What if you say, Prasad, I'm not interested in getting all the bank details. I'm interested in fetching only one specific bank. Is there an endpoint available for it, guys? Okay, let's say we don't want to fetch
parameters.
Yeah, query or template parameters. So the first thing is I don't want to fetch all the banks. I want to fetch only one bank. Okay, so we could see in the documentation that there's one more endpoint to get a specific bank details. So what is it that I would do? If you compare these two endpoints, is method the same, guys? Yes, get method. Is path a same? It's almost the same. It's almost the same. It's just that if you want to get all the banks, you don't have to pass in any bank party ID at the end. But if you are interested to fetch only one specific bank party ID, you have to, if you want to fetch only one specific bank, then you would have to pass in a primary key or a bank party ID so that this endpoint is going to fetch only that specific bank details. And in Postman tool, one advantage that you have is once you have a successful request, you can pick it up, right click on it, and you can say duplicate tab, and that would duplicate the entire request here. It copies the URL, authorization, and so on. Now, when we don't pass in any bank party ID at the end, it's going to get all the banks. And if I want to get only one specific bank details, what should I be doing, guys? To the endpoint URL, after cache banks, I should be adding a bank party ID. So can I pick up one of the bank party ID from here, guys? Let's say I pick up a bank party ID of, say, ABN AMRO Bank. I pick up that bank party ID, which is a primary key, and I'm going to paste that in here. So what do you think would happen, guys? Would I get back all the banks, or would I get only ABN AMRO Bank now?
Only ABN AMRO Bank.
Only one specific bank we're getting back in the response. So when you look at this get all banks endpoint call, you are seeing a collection of items coming back. And each item in the collection is a bank in itself, and you've got plenty of them. You've got plenty of them. But if you if you try to call get a bank endpoint, since you're passing in a specific bank party ID, you're getting only that specific bank details here in the response. Now, can we only get the bank details, guys, or can we also do a create or update operations as well? Do we have create a bank and update endpoints, guys? Shall we give it a try?
Yeah.
Let's see if create works. What should I do, guys, for a create endpoint? What method should I use?
Post.
Post method. Okay, I'll choose post method. What is the URL? I copy this URL. Is this the complete path?
No.
Is that the complete path? No. What should I do to that particular path? I need to add the ERP base URL. ERP base URL I need to add and ensure that you don't have double slashes there. And should I pass in authorization details? Yes or no?
Yes.
Very much required. And anything else that we need to pass in here?
We need a request payload.
Payload.
Yeah.
So even pass the payload, right?
Yeah, we need to pass the bank details. We need to pass in a request payload. And in the request payload, I should mention with what details I want a bank to be created. See, to keep it simple, if I'm trying to call this, if I'm calling this endpoint, it would fetch all the banks, and I don't have to pass anything for it. And if I have to get only one bank, I'm passing in a bank party ID. Since we are trying to fetch the information, either you don't pass anything or you pass in one or two identifiers based on which you want to get the details. But when you try to, and you cannot pass in a request payload for the get endpoints. Okay, that is really important, guys. You cannot, okay, so what is it that we do? We cannot call in the get endpoints. Sorry, we cannot pass in request payload with the get endpoints. So instead, what is it that we should do? we should only, and even for the delete also, you cannot pass in request payloads only when you're calling a post or a patch endpoints. Only when you're trying to call a create or update endpoints, you can pass in a request payload, and it makes sense as well, right? Only when you're creating something or updating something, you need to pass in the details. Otherwise, no. So since I'm calling this endpoint, I need to go to the body tab, and here I need to mention with what details I want a bank to be created. Now tell me one thing, guys, when we tested a SOAP services yesterday using a SOAP UI tool, I loaded in a WSDL in SOAP UI, a testing tool, and did SOAP UI create a sample request for all the operations, guys? Yes or no?
Yes.
We just loaded in the WSDL in a SOAP UI, and SOAP UI has created sample requests for every operation. But please note, guys, REST APIs work in a completely different fashion. Even if after you mention the REST endpoint here, Postman will not be able to generate any sample payloads. Instead, you need to mention it explicitly because the architecture of a REST APIs is completely different. Now, the next thing that you do is, then Prasad, where do I get the sample payloads from? The good news is you don't have to look elsewhere. These hyperlinks that you see, right? You just click on the hyperlink and that will show you the individual page. And if you just scroll down, you would be able to see the sample request and response payloads directly within that individual URLs itself. Now you see that there's a sample request payload given by Oracle for creating a bank. And what is this payload format, guys? It is called as a JSON format. It stands for JavaScript Object Notation. And the entire JSON payload goes into curly braces. And if you look at the payload, it is you're going to mention the payload in a very simple format. You would be mentioning it as a key value pair. You would be mentioning an attribute name, and you would be mentioning the attribute value, comma, second attribute name, second attribute value, comma, third attribute name, colon, third attribute value. So this is exactly how you mention a JSON payload. It's going to be pretty simple, lightweight when compared to XMLs. And when you mention the attribute name and the value, you put everything in quotes. If it is a number, you can still put it in quotes, no issues at all. Or you can skip it as well. But to keep it uniform, we put everything in quotes. So in a JSON payload, you put everything in curly braces, attribute name, colon, attribute value, and so on. And if you compare this JSON payload with XML payload, in XML, what do we see, guys? What's the problem we see with XML? You see that in XML, for every attribute, you see a start tag and you see an end tag, meaning every tag is repeated twice, and in between them, you have the actual value. So which means the payload size itself is becoming double here. So if I convert this into a JSON payload, how exactly would that look like, guys? So if I create a new request here, so the entire JSON payload is going to go into curly braces. The entire JSON payload is going to go into curly braces. And you would be mentioning the attribute name, colon, attribute value, and you say comma, and you mention the second attribute name, colon, and you mention the second attribute value. So if you convert this XML payload into JSON, this is how simple it's going to look like. You just have to put it in curly braces, attribute name in quotes, colon, attribute value. But if you look at XML, you have to mention everything in twice. So what does it mean, guys? Since a REST APIs use JSON format for communication, and since JSON payload is quite simple, lightweight, payload size is half of what you have in XML, you should always use REST APIs for communication, guys. Your first preference should always be REST APIs. If and only if Oracle has not given a REST API for any business object, only in such cases, what is it that you would be doing, guys? Only in such cases, you would be using a SOAP services, guys. Again, I don't want anybody to ask the same question in any different wording. when I open up a session for Q&A, because I see at least 2 or 3 students asking the same question, even though I repeatedly say that you should always prefer REST APIs instead of SOAP services. Okay, now please don't ask again. In a Q&A, result, should I prefer REST or SOAP and why? I'm already answering it 3 times here. You should always be preferring REST APIs only if a REST API is not given by Oracle for any business object. In such cases, only you go and search in the SOAP service documentation and pick it up and use it. Now, the next question that you normally ask is, Prasad, do we have everything available as a REST as well as a SOAP? Not really. For some business objects, you might only have REST or you might only have SOAP. And for some business objects, you might have both a SOAP service and a REST API. But it doesn't really matter to you and me. Our approach is simple. Anything you want to do, search for REST API. Only if REST API is not available, go for SOAP service. What if both are not available? Then you go back to client and say that's not possible. But it would be very, very rare. You would have either SOAP or REST. So I copy this sample payload with the help of which you can create a bank. And what I want to do was I want to prefix your batch identifier. And I would also increment the batch bank number. And I'll prefix this batch identifier to the alternate name, description, and the taxpayer ID number as well. Do we have this bank in the application, guys? Let's go back and check. I apply that bank name as a filter. Do you see a bank with this name, guys? No?
Yeah.
Let's hit the send button now. So I'm asking Postman to get into this application with these credentials. And I'm asking it to post this bank in ERP and give me back a result, which it would do. You see a result coming in here, guys? And in the response, what is it that you see? You see a 201 created response. If it is a successful creation, you see 201. And when you look at the response, what do we see, guys? Whatever bank details that you passed in the request payload, you get that back in the response also. And along with it, you see a bank party ID, a primary key or a unique reference generated for this bank in Fusion Cloud. This itself is like a successful confirmation for us that the bank is created. And along with it, you also see the who columns. So a bank has been created in ERP with these details, and we got a response with the bank details plus who columns in the response and a primary key. Now, if I go back to Fusion Cloud, and if I just search for it again, I see a bank created. And when I click on the bank, I would be able to see the bank details. Okay, it's showing the previous bank. Search for this particular bank. Okay, there is a bug on the screen, guys. Sometimes it doesn't work as expected. So you go back to the bank again. Go out of the screen and come back in again. Search for the bank and you click on the bank name. What do we see now, guys? We see the bank details showing up. You see the country name, bank name, alternate bank name, bank code, whatever details that I passed in the payload here. With those details, a bank was created in cloud. Can we only create a bank, guys, or can we also update a bank as well? We do see an update endpoint as well. Let's give it a try. It's a patch method that I should use, right? So I create a new request. I use a patch because I want to update a bank. I copy the path, paste it here. What should I do, guys, to the path? That's a relative path, and I should add the ERP Cloud instance URL as a base URL. That's how you get the complete endpoint URL. I'm doing it for the 4th time. That's why I'm doing it a bit faster. Don't panic. Go to authorization details, enter the login credentials, and you need to mention which bank do you want to update. So I can go back and pick up the bank party ID of a UG112 bank, and I'm going to pass in that bank party ID here. You would have noticed a pattern by now. What's the pattern in the path that you see, guys? Method is okay, right? Get for get, delete for delete, post for create, patch for update. When you look at the methods, if you're trying to get all the banks, or if you're trying to create a bank, you don't need to pass in a bank party ID. But if you need to get, update, or delete a specific bank, since it is one specific bank that you need to act upon, you should be passing in bank party ID as input. Since you need to get, update, or delete a specific bank, you have to pass in a template parameter. So what is this called as, guys? In the relative path, if you have a slash and if you have curly braces, these are called as template parameters, guys. Okay. So you would have to pass in bank party ID as a template parameter, which is a primary key on the bank's table. So if you hit the bank's table with a bank party ID, you get only one bank and you will be getting the details of that bank here. That bank would be updated and that would be deleted here. So I'm trying to update that specific bank. So I'm asking Postman to log into this instance with these credentials, search for this particular bank and update it. Now, obviously, it would say, Prasad, tell me, what do you want to update? Well, since it is a patch method, guys, I don't need to pass in all the details. Now, what do you do if there is a puncture on your car tire, guys? You patch only that particular part, right? You don't replace a whole tire. So that's exactly the same thing that we are doing here. We are updating a specific bank and we want to update only few attributes. We don't want to replace the entire bank. So since it is a patch method, what is it that I should do? I can go to this update a bank endpoint and I can pick up the sample payload from here. It says I can pass in a bank name, description, and so on. You see a sample payloads, guys. Another important point, guys, when you look at the sample payloads here, don't think that these are the only columns that you can pass. If you scroll up a little bit, what do you get to see, guys? You would be able to see that there is a request payload. And you see these are all the fields that you can pass as input. These are all the fields that we can pass as input, guys. Not just the bank name and a description. And if you click on show source, it would even tell you which fields can be null and which fields cannot be. So alternate name nullable is true, which means you can leave it as blank, but a bank name cannot be nullable false. So this way, so when you look at a sample payload, don't think that these are the only fields that you can pass in. It's just a sample that you have. And if you want to see the complete list of fields that you can pass and which of them are mandatory or no, you look at this documentation. And I can pass it in here and I don't want to update the bank name. Okay, I'm trying to update this bank. I want to leave the bank name as is and I want to update only the description. So how do I do that, guys? To do that, I go ahead and include only the description here. And I mention what is it that I want to update it as. So I say update it. Let's say I do a description. Okay, UG 112. Now, when I hit the send button, what do I see, guys, now? Application will, this API will update only the description on my bank. Everything else would remain the same. I hit the send button, you see, it would update the description on a bank and I'm going to get back a response. I see 200, okay. I see the bank details coming back. And if you look at the description, it is a complete updated description that we see. Okay. Now, if I go back, you see the old description here, guys. And if I go ahead and hit the enter button again, you see the updated description. So that's how you update the banks. So this way, guys, we can make use of REST APIs to do a CRUD operations in cloud, create, update, read, and delete a bank. We tried 4 out of 5 endpoints, guys. We did not test the delete a bank endpoint because in the bank's resource, this doesn't work, guys. Even in the front end also, or even in the application UI, here also you don't see an option to delete a bank. You might say, Prasad, then why Oracle has given this endpoint, mention this in the documentation. Sometimes you might have an endpoint which doesn't work, very, very rare, but sometimes you have those scenarios. You can excuse this. Now, as I explain all of this, when I open up a session for Q&A, the first thing that comes raises in the session is, that comes up in a session is, Prasad, I don't want to fetch all the banks. And at the same time, I also don't want to fetch a bank based on a bank party ID. Because how do you expect me to know? How do you expect me to know the bank party ID which is a primary key of a bank, to get a specific bank details. Instead, I don't want to get all the banks. I want to get a specific bank details, but I don't want to pass in a bank party ID to get it. Maybe I want to pass in a country name. I want to pass in either a country name or I want to pass in a bank name. And based on those details, I want to get the bank details. So to keep it simple, let's say you want to get the banks based out of US. I want this in the API response. How do I do that? That is exactly where a second type of parameter comes into picture. The first parameter that we have seen is template parameter that you see mentioned as curly braces here. And the second type of parameter that you can pass on the REST APIs is query parameters, and you would find them on getAll endpoint. So you click on getAll and you see a query string. And in the query string, you can see what are all the query parameters that you can pass in. And how do you pass in the query parameters, guys? You have to put Q equal to, you pass in the parameter name and you pass in the value there. So let me show you how it works, guys. I go back to Postman tool and this endpoint is fetching all the banks. And there's one more endpoint which is fetching only one bank, but I want something in between. So I'm going to duplicate this tab and I'm going to push it here. So I don't want to get all the banks. I don't want to get only one bank based on a bank party ID. Instead, I want to get the banks based on a bank name. So I'll put a question mark and I say Q equal to, and I say country name. Let's pass in country name equal to United States. So what is it that's going to happen now, guys? I would be getting back, since these are query parameters which are enabled by default by Oracle on the API, I can go ahead and get the banks based on a country name. So I say question mark Q equal to, Q is like query parameter. The other is a template parameter that we have seen. This is template parameter and this is query parameter. And when you pass in country name equal to US, how many banks would you get back, guys, here? So if you scroll down, you see that there are total 9 banks that you have gone back. Let's go back and check. Do we have 9 banks here, guys? You see 9 banks, and the same 9 banks have come back in the response here. So it is like what you have done here on the screen, right? Applying United States as a query on the banks or as a filter on the banks. That's exactly what a query parameter would do. Whatever query parameter that you pass in here will be applied as a filter on the bank's resource, like what you're doing here. And you get only the resources which match that filter. And you see Bank of America, that's the first bank that you see. Second bank is Chase Bank. Third is Citibank, and so on. So this way, you can pass in query parameters which are more user-friendly. And it's not that you can pass in only one query parameter at a time, guys. You can even club them as well. So for example, if I want to pass in a bank name also, I can use a semicolon in between. And what I can do, I can say bank name equal to, let's say, a Citibank. Now, what would happen if I do it this way? So this is like we're asking REST API to search for the banks where country name equal to US and bank name equal to Citibank. Hit the send button, you get back a response. And how many banks we see? We don't see 9 banks now. We get only one bank, which matches these 2 conditions. So this way, you can make use of query parameters to apply filters on the getAll resource and get a limited set of banks based on a user-friendly criteria. Any questions from anyone, guys? Please raise your hand so that I'll call out your name. Yes, Ravi.
Prasad, if I want to do query parameter based on a while character, do I do that? So for
You would
example, I
have
do
to
not.
use need to use a BI report for it in the integration, and we'll cover that in the outbound flow service.
Sure, thanks.
Okay. Yeah. Any other questions, guys? Mayank?
Prasad, is there any legacy data where all banks record are stored and we are fetching from there?
Certainly, when client implements a Fusion Cloud application, right, they would already be using a system at the moment They might probably be using Oracle eBusiness Suite, or they might be using PeopleSoft, or they might use JD Edwards. There is an current ERP system that they're using. From there, you're going to fetch the banks and you would be loading it in here. Okay. Navneet?
Yeah, Prashad, I just want to know, so is there any identification, like whether it's a internal bank or an external bank?
Okay, so this is basically internal bank account of the organization that you are adding here. And if it is an external bank account, you will be adding it directly within the customer and the suppliers or the employees. Okay, so what the banks that you're seeing on screen is internal bank accounts of the company.
Okay. So like with this REST API, only the internal banks will get
Internal bank
created.
account, yeah. For supplier, if you have to load a bank account on supplier or a customer or employee, you have separate REST APIs for them.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Akshay?
Actually, are we able to see the whole information, like when the record is created, who has created or who has updated?
Yeah, yes, we can do that. So if you search for, say, UG112, most of the screens do give you that functionality, and you normally call it as record history. So if you click on this, okay, click on view and click on about this record, and that's going to show you the history, like who has created it, when, who has updated it, and when. And if you're probably coming in with EBS background, you might be finding one important piece missing here. What is it?
The table
business
name.
name. The
Table
table.
name.
Yes. Yeah. You would only find the who columns here. You won't find any table names there. Yes. I'm not sure who has logged in with Lenovo. Please go on.
So my doubt is like soap service, what for example, if you get the too many objects at the primary key, okay.
Now, if you get too many objects, first of all, I'm losing your voice in between. First of all, if you get too many objects, you don't call it as a primary key. Primary key itself means when you hit the table with that primary key, you get only one row. That is the basic definition of a primary key. So what is it that you normally see as a primary key here? So when you try to do a get, update, or delete, you would be passing in a primary key, and you get only one record from a table. And in some cases, some business objects might have a combination of columns as a primary key. In such cases, you will be passing in two columns there to get a unique record. Okay.
I can agree actually. So when we are hitting, actually, we are getting the error like the primary key.
I think you have some problem with internet at your end. I can only hear the first word and the last word that you're saying. And I'm trying to do a guessing game here. Just drop me a note in WhatsApp. I'll respond back. Otherwise, tomorrow, find a better place because we can barely hear you. Okay, tomorrow morning at the beginning of the session, go on with your question. Preeti?
Prasad, in Postman, I can see a put method. What is that put method?
If you use a put method, put is something that you can use when you're updating a bank. If you use patch when you're updating something, and again, you cannot choose. You don't have the flexibility to choose what to use. If Oracle has given patch, you have to use patch. If Oracle has given put here, then you can use put. What's the difference between them? Patch means you can mention only the attribute that you want to update. On the bank, I wanted to update only the description, so I'm passing only that. But if it is a put is like replacing the entire tire or replacing the entire resource, right? So if it is a put method that you have to use here, I cannot just pass in description, because if you use a put method, it is like we telling this endpoint to take out that entire bank that exists in the application and replace it with these details. In which case, you should be passing in not just a description, but you should be passing in all the details here. All the bank details you have to pass, not just only the attribute that you want to update. Okay, so when you're updating something, you can use patch or put. If it is patch, that means you can pass in only the attribute that you want to update. If it is put, you have to pass in the complete resource again. Clear? So if it is, okay, let me do it this way. I'll duplicate it. So if I have to, if it is a patch and if I want to update a description, I would pass in only the description. If it is a put, then what is it that I should do? I go to the body. I cannot pass in only the description. Instead, I have to pass in the whole payload, and the description alone, I would update it and I pass it this way. So that what would happen? The entire bank resource that is available in Fusion Cloud will be replaced with this bank. Is that clear? Put means you have to pass in the entire payload, all the details of the bank. Patch means you can pass in only the attribute you
So
want to
will the
update.
bank party ID also get updated? I mean,
It doesn't get updated. Only the other attributes get updated because you're already mentioning bank party ID. It knows which bank it has to update. On that particular bank, these are the attributes that are going to get replaced. And obviously, when you're trying to do it, you will also be including a bank party ID also. Okay.
okay.
Any other questions from anyone, guys? Okay. In tomorrow's session, what we do is we will try to understand how to create OIC instance from OCI screen. And we will understand the user creation and role assignment in OIC, guys. That's what we'll be focusing on in tomorrow's session. And Monday, we get started with building integrations in OIC. Yes, Sujata, go on.
Sorry, I clicked the audio before the hand raising. Quickly to ask on this parameter thing, if I wanted a country name to be a country 1 or country 2, such logical conditions could be given?
You have to use a custom BIP report for it. You can see, there are a few things that you can try out. Say, for example, if you see query, right? You see that there is something called as logical operators that you can pass in. But see, if some REST APIs, which REST API, which operator does it support on which attribute is something that you have to try out. Only then you get to know. Say, for example, if you say Q equal to country name equal to US or country name equal to UK, give it a try. See if it works. If it works, well and good. Otherwise, what do? You ask a technical consultant to create a BA report and you call it in your integration.
Right. So it could quite possibly could do any one of those operators. Is it on the query parameter? In this case, it's accepting only AND operator. Is that right?
No. This is just an example that Oracle has given.
Okay.
Yeah, just an example to show you that it supports arithmetic operators, logical operators, and you can pass in multiple parameters. That is all it is trying to signify. It doesn't mean that it supports AND, but it doesn't support OR, nothing like it. And if you go to any other endpoint, right? So for example, you go to AR invoice endpoint, you see the same story repeated there. Go to AR invoice. How many endpoints you should find here? There are a couple of more, but don't worry about them, like approve and others. You see create, update, delete, and you have 2 endpoints to get the invoice details. And when you're trying to create an invoice or getting all the invoice details, we don't have to pass an invoice ID. But if you're trying to update it, or if you're trying to delete a specific invoice, you're passing an invoice ID there. And if it is a get all invoices, see, one thing that I can do is I can pass in invoice ID and get only one specific invoice, which is basically customer transaction ID. Otherwise, if I want to get the invoices based on query parameter, I can click on query. And these are all the query parameters that I can use. So you see the same string given there. It is just an example. And what is it that I can do if I want to get the invoices based on invoice status, which are complete? I want to get the completed invoices. So I say question mark Q equal to invoice status equal to complete, and so on. Okay.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Navneet?
So it's related to the yesterday session. So like we provided the authentication username and password. So like if I'm working where we have the SSO login, so in that case I have to provide my SSO. login
No,
details?
you will even if SSO is enabled, you still need to have at least one dedicated user created because some SOAP and REST APIs support only basic auth. SSOs don't work here. So you would, even though SSOs are enabled, you will still create one user called as ERP integration user, and you share those details with the third parties.
Okay, so there is no way like where we can
No,
get
SSOs are
it
not
tested with
supported.
SSO.
Yeah.
Okay.
There are
Yeah, thank
other
you.
options. There are other options like OAuth tokens and username password tokens. I'll talk about it when we do the first APIs. Okay.
Sure.
When we build the
Thank
first
you.
two integrations, I'll explain them. Ravi?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. See you.